So I often get asked this question, and I would love to answer it. This is going to be kind of like a mini series because I have a lot of stories about some of the odd and strange things I've experienced doing subtle body readings. Now, with all my readings, I try and deeply protect the identity of who I am reading. I deeply respect privacy. I will not be referring to anybody by any particular name, and I won't even be showing their subtle bodies. This is just some stories. Let's begin with one that I often refer to as one of my most peculiar, because as someone who has psychic perception and who really practices this often, it caught me so off guard that it made me question reality for a hot minute. Most of my sessions actually start off with us having a little chit chat for the first 30 minutes. And in doing so, that allows me to kind of focus my right here brain and allow my psychic perception to really grab out and go. But this session started off immediately odd because as my psychic perception reached out, I didn't get a whole lot. Most individuals have a crown, a third eye, they have energy centers all down their body, and there's a field that comes out, sort of like a magnetic field or an energetic field of energy. People refer to that as the aura. There's a whole lot of anatomy and mechanisms that are at play and are very easy to pick up. But this individual didn't have any of that. No, this individual just had a singular point, a compaction of something that didn't even translate to my mind as what I would typically see with energy. When I see disembodied people or folks who have passed on, their subtle bodies compress down into almost like a tight orb. And that tight orb reads as many energy centers overlapped. It has its own little field as well. It's much more like what I would anticipate, but this was even more different than that. And as we're literally talking about the weather, my psychic perception is going further closer to this point and starts kind of poking at it because I'm not sure what I'm picking up, and then it moves. This little orb opens like an iris, a gateway, a portal, an entry point to elsewhere for their subtle anatomy. And I shit you not, a pupil comes up and looks through. They're totally fine. They're sitting there having an experience, and I'm definitely having an experience because what I am seeing is their subtle anatomy is a point where something else can observe through them. It was the strangest experience because what was peering back at me just didn't make any sense. And then the more that I kind of zoned in on it even further, I got a sense that what was behind that portal was so massive, was so expansive, and it had several eyes, and it just was observation incarnate in this individual soul. And that's all they were. A point of experience, a point of observation. Their soul was elsewhere, watching. As an occult practitioner, I had to figure out what was happening. So I sent my perception through the gate towards this eye. And once it kind of popped through the other side, the only thing that I can describe my experience there is so abstracted that I don't know if English is going to serve me very well, but I'll do my best and to say that that was like a pocket dimension that held this being, that kept it isolated and insulated. It was a protective space for this being to observe. The sense that I got from this entity, this soul being on the other side, was very childlike and very excitable and very happy and joyful and just happy to see me. But then it also was trying to reach out towards me in addition, and I was like, I don't know if I want to be touched because I'm in its space now and it's not in my space. I excused myself from its space and retracted back through the portal, and the eye came back around and was watching, and I told the young woman, I'm not going to charge you for this reading because I would just draw an eyeball for you as your subtle body portrait, and that doesn't seem very exciting. But what I will do is explain exactly what I just experienced. Needless to say, the session was short and left the poor girl with more questions than answers. I'm still in contact with her and we do talk from time to time. They have really interesting experiences, and it is one of the more strange stories I have to tell. That is one of many things I've encountered doing subtle body portraits. I've been reading over 15 years and that one just still sticks out as the most unique. That said, if you're curious to see what sort of subtle body you have, feel free to book a reading here. I would be happy to do your soul portrait, explain all the bits and pieces that I'm seeing there, and give you a point of reference for if you want to do some subtle body anatomy work on yourself, or use it as a guide to help gauge your spiritual work as you're doing it going forward. Consider that. Thank you for listening, and until next time, see ya. Ask and you shall receive. Let me tell you about the story of the person who got eaten fully, consumed. As a subtle body portrait and psychic reader, I have encountered lots of interesting and strange stories over the years. Let's go into another. The reading starts off like most readings do. Say hello, how are you? I immediately start drawing, they're watching me draw, and we're just chit-chatting about whatever comes to mind, just a general topic. When my psychic perception reached out towards them, however, I got a very weird sense of not one, but two entities inhabiting one space. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting, making a mental note because fascinating. And as my psychic perception was going down through the main energy channels of this individual's body, I recognized that there was another set just behind them on their back. And there were these weird things wrapping around the subtle anatomy of this individual who I'm reading and pulling them tighter in. Oh my God. This other entity was pulled over top of the individual's face, so they didn't really get a chance to perceive or see outside of what this other entity was allowing them to perceive, and in some instances was actually amplifying their ability to sense with their own senses. So it was almost symbiotic, except that as this back and forth of energy was happening, this other entity was slowly consuming the other. I have never in my life used this terminology, but for all of the world, it looked like psychic teeth were slowly chewing upwards along all of the subtle anatomy. It was eating them, just with these little centipede-like arms, and each one of them had like little teeth, and it was just pulling them in so that it was completely surrounding them, and they were consenting to this. As I got further into the reading, this individual said, yep, this is the succubus who I have a relationship with, and by the end of this lifetime, they're going to utterly consume me so I can be part of her. I have never seen anything like this before, and since then, I've never seen anything quite like what I witnessed with this reading in particular. The individual had a very strong connection to this individual. The things that I was picking up about their subtle anatomy was very similar to their experiences of what has been happening with them over many years. And it was part a way to release and to forge in a new direction by completely submitting themselves to this other entity so that they could become part of this other entity going forward. They didn't see it as a negative, and personally for me, it wouldn't be a choice that I would make. Now that alone constitutes a story in and of itself, but there's more to this story, because after the reading, I had a very strange dream where this entity came to me that was consuming him and presented in the dream of wanting to have a little chit chat. And in this chit chat, this entity thanked me and was very happy to have met me again, which, long story, I will get into that one, that's a whole other tale. But this entity apparently remembered me from past lives and was there to thank me for my work and checking in on me, and fascinating. It's very rare for me to have a reading and then something happen after the reading is over that makes me question things that I've experienced again. So do I believe that that's a succubus? Yeah, I definitely think that that qualifies as a succubus, maybe not a traditional succubus. Whatever this entity is, they prefer to be called a succubus. That is how I did an energy body reading of a succubus and their victim, their munch, their buffet, their dinner date, both the date and the dinner in one. 2-for-1 deal, dinner date. The dinner is the date. The date is the dinner. There we go. I got it. See, we got there eventually. And one other fun little tidbit, this individual actually commissioned me to do a more illustrative drawing of their succubus partner. I also drew what I saw in the dream, and it aligned with their experience of how they witnessed this entity as well. So multiple points of like odd confirmation, and just you never know what you're going to find out there as a psychic reader of any kind, especially when you're doing subtle bodies and energy bodies. If you're curious and have some strange things happening in your life and want to see what your subtle body looks like, you can go ahead and book a reading here. Be happy to have you. And who knows what's hidden within.